Let's talk Tanya for the 25th of Shevat. In the last 2 days, we've been talking about the value of the internal struggle. Nothing to be ashamed about or frustrated by the fact that we have an animal soul, a difficult animal soul, and I think everyone is under the impression that their animal soul and their internal struggle is more difficult than anyone else's. And even if it is true, which it probably isn't, nothing to be ashamed about. That's how God created you, and there's tremendous value to that struggle, tremendous value to the suppression of the animal soul and its impulses. With this, the Alter Rebbe explains an interesting something that the Talmud tells us. Back in the day, people didn't ordinarily eat 3 meals a day, they had 2 meals a day. So one was mid-morning and the other one was towards the evening. And the Talmud tells us that the way it was is that most people, the average person, they would have their morning meal in the 4th hour of the day, starting with the morning. And Talmidei Chachamim, the Torah scholars, they would delay their meal, and their first meal, they would have it during the 6th hour of the day, so shortly before noon, which is interesting. And the question is why? Why would they delay their meal? What value is there in delaying the meal by 2 hours? And the Alter Rebbe tells us the reason why they delayed their meal for 2 hours was for this purpose, to suppress the animal soul. Meaning, even if I'm not feeling a struggle, I'm going to bring the struggle to the animal soul, and I'm going to turn to the animal and say, hey, you're hungry, right? You want to eat right now the cornflakes? Yeah, we'll wait a little. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that this is only done because it didn't impact their Torah study, and they weren't actually weakened by that in any which way. But this brings us to a certain value, which in Chassidic terminology is known as Iskafya. Iskafya literally means suppression, which means suppressing the animal soul, and when it wants something, the ability to turn to it and say, no, or at the very least, not now. Why? Because you want it, and because I want my godly soul to be in control, and therefore, I am going to suppress the desires of the animal soul. It's not only about food. It could be about food. It could be any other sort of indulgence. The Alter Rebbe says it could even be when you're talking, you're having a conversation. You want to say something. You want to say something which you think is smart and witty, and you say, I'm not going to say it, or I'll put it off by a minute. You can have even Iskafya, suppression in thoughts, not thinking about things that you want to think about. The point in all of them remains the same. The animal soul wants it. There is a value, and God receives this tremendous pleasure from suppressing the animal soul. And a very important point over here is, it's not because there's anything wrong with the food or with the words that you're about to say. It's because there's something wrong with you. Now, I don't mean that literally. There's nothing wrong with you, as we explained. This is how God created you. It's because that desire, the desire to eat that thing right now or to say that thing right now, is coming from an unholy place. Not a bad place, but because it's not holy, you are going to suppress it and give God that tremendous pleasure. It's not the Chassidic version of a diet, because it doesn't have to do, it's not about, oh, it's chocolate cake, so I'm going to put it off. It could be a glass of water. It could be your Cheerios and milk in the morning. The point is understanding just how much God treasures the struggle and the suppression of the animal soul. It's not only when I want to do something that's forbidden, so I suppress the animal soul. Or if the animal soul is telling me not to do something I'm supposed to do, I relish the idea and the opportunity to suppress the animal soul whenever I can. And all this gives us such a deep insight into the important role that we play in serving God specifically through and because of the animal soul and our ability to suppress it. Again, there's nothing to be ashamed about. There's nothing to be frustrated about. There's no reason for negative emotions. To the contrary, we're supposed to struggle against the animal soul with tremendous joy and excitement, knowing just how much pleasure this gives God, and as mentioned yesterday, the cosmic influence this has on all the worlds. With this, we have concluded the topic of shame. Tomorrow, we are going to move on to our final genre of negative emotions, and that is feelings of hypocrisy and inauthenticity. Join us tomorrow, and we'll talk about that, God willing.